So now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. His name is Wendell Cox. He is the principal of Demographia, an international public policy consulting firm in St. Louis. He also serves as a visiting professor in Paris at CNAM, the largest university in France. He was appointed to 3 terms on the Los Angeles County Transportation Commission by Mayor Tom Bradley and was elected to serve as chair of 2 American Public Transit Association committees. Speaker of the House, Representative Newt Gingrich, appointed him to complete the unexpired term of New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman on the Amtrak Reform Council. He grew up in the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia, and won the Oregon State Mile cross-country championship while attending high school in Hillsborough. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wendell Cox.
Thank you. You may want to turn this down. I have a big voice, you know. They'll hear me down at City Hall if we're not careful. Anyway, it is a great pleasure to be with you this evening to talk about issues of great interest and import to Clark County. As Josephine indicated, I have ties here to this part of the country, know a good bit about it, and it's a real pleasure to be back. So what we're going to do tonight is go through a number of issues with respect to light rail and tolls with respect to Clark County. Now, what I want to do in the beginning is tell you a little bit about some of the work we do. We sponsor three websites. One is Demographia.com, which is largely demographic information. The second is PublicPurpose.com, which is largely transportation. And the third is Urban Tours by Rental Car, or RentalCarTours.net, which has travel logs on every megacity in the world except Karachi. That's 25 of them, as well as about 75 others. I just love to travel and take pictures, and so that's all there. We also publish 2 other interesting things. One is called the Megacity Book, which gives you links to all of the travel logs on the megacities around the world. We also publish something called World Urban Areas and Population Projections, which provides population estimates and land area and density estimates for all urban areas in the world of more than 500,000 people. My passion has been for the last few years to try to get the word out to make sure people understand that how we live in America is how everybody else wants to live. You know, there is this view that basically suggests, you know, we all like to live in the suburbs and have our cars. Don't you believe for one moment that there isn't everywhere else the same interest in that? This picture right here with the 2 SUVs in the driveway is from the suburbs of Moscow. And you can see anywhere you go in the world, with a couple of exceptions, you're going to see this kind of thing. This is a picture from Bangkok. We've got 2 cars. Now, granted, they don't have a garage. They just have a carport. But you go to the suburbs of Bangkok, you go to the suburbs of Jakarta, you go to the suburbs of European City, and you find things that look very similar to the United States. This publication at the bottom of the screen is our annual Demographia International Housing Affordability Survey, where we rate the affordability of 270 markets in 6 countries on housing affordability. Our 7th edition will be coming out this year, and this is my book. You can't read any of that stuff, but we do have a book on the subject. My goodness, I can't hardly even read that. What we're going to do tonight is talk in essentially 6 segments. One, the context, and the context is very important. Think about the fact that today the Columbian says that your unemployment rate in Clark County is nearing 14%. That's pretty high. Probably hasn't been that high since the Depression. We then want to talk a little bit about Portland and its planning philosophy, because that's one of the things that's really at stake here. And you in Vancouver and Clark County, with all due respect, have not signed on to Portland's planning philosophy. Then we'll talk about population and economic trends, not only in Clark County, but throughout the Portland metropolitan area. Talk about light rail and its implications for Clark County, a little bit about Columbia River crossing and tolls, and then, because there's always great interest in the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, how all of that fits with the various transportation proposals. Now, I served, as was indicated, 3 terms on the Los Angeles County Transportation Commission. I am perceived around the world as a real critic on rail. I'm even considered an anti-light rail activist. In fact, I'm not anti-rail, I'm not anti-light rail, and I'm not anti-transit. I'm anti-waste. And I am happy to support those programs in transit that are not wasteful. And in fact, my belief that rail was the answer for Los Angeles caused me in 1980 to introduce an amendment to a tax act which created the money for the Los Angeles rail system. Wouldn't have happened without me. It would have been at least 10 years before it happened. So at least the first 2 rail lines in Los Angeles occurred because of me. Now, what happened in the interim after that, and why I became critical of rail, is the reason that I was interested in rail was out of a belief that it would reduce traffic congestion. It didn't take long, with all the new rail systems being built around the country, including in Portland, to find out that there was no such effect whatsoever anywhere in the world of any long-lasting matter. So that obviously I came to the view that, you know, in the long run, we need to move society, we need to move traffic, and if rail is not going to reduce traffic congestion, that's another matter. So we have that background. Now, what I want to do is talk about, if I can read it here, the sort of what should be the context of any discussion about public spending and about transportation and about planning. And it is about affluence. What we want to do in this society and what the Indonesian government would like to do and the Chinese government and the government of Germany would like to do is to ensure that and improve the affluence of its citizens, to create better lifestyles or facilitate better lifestyles for them. And this is very important because the research is very strong to indicate that the more freely people can move, the better economic growth. What we have here is just a picture of suburban Albuquerque. What you have, unfortunately, is an urban planning philosophy that has grown up in this country and around the world that is absolutely contemptuous of the American suburban ideal, which, by the way, is the world's suburban ideal. Go to China at this point, you will see everyone would love to live in a detached house like we live in. They can't because they're too expensive. You go anywhere you want in this country, you're going to find that kind of thing. So what we do, I hope I'm not losing this thing. I think I am. We need to be very careful not to take for granted economic growth. And I would hope at this point, after going through the worst economic decline since the Great Depression, that we're now about ready to understand the importance of economic growth and jobs and job creation. This chart basically shows what has happened to the gross domestic product per capita on an inflation-adjusted basis through 2000 of various countries. The top blue line, you see, starts down there in 1900 and goes way up. That's the United States. Japan does pretty well. Western Europe does pretty well. But look, if you go back to the 1930s, you find that Argentina was the 3rd best economy in the world. Look at it now. It's about ready to be taken over by Mexico. What this says is that policies matter. You can waste money. You can ruin your economy, and that's been done in places like Argentina and other places around the world, and we need to be very careful not to take economic growth and job creation for granted. So that the research definitely shows, this is data from the OECD by economist Angus Maddison, who just passed away, that basically says here is the richest country in the world from 1500, that is the richest that was recorded on about a 50-year basis, richest country in gross domestic product per capita in $2,000 up to 2000 from the year 1500. Notice between 1500 and 1800 AD, there was almost no change in gross domestic product per capita. During that period of time, the average person in the world, including places like Europe, at the top, in places like Netherlands and so on, which were rich by standards at that point, didn't even do as well as in India today, which is about $2,000 per capita. Then in 1800, actually about 1820, you start getting transit improvements, horse cars, eventually street cars, that kind of thing. The GDP per capita starts to go up because of the mobility, and transit does pretty well. And then after 1900, look at the explosion that goes on in terms of affluence. And that is also obviously associated with the coming of the automobile. And by the way, just to show you, you're going to see a lot of pictures of places around the world. This is Changsha, Canada. Changsha, China. You see cars all over the place, brand new buildings. I mean, if any of you have not been to China and get the chance, go. You will not believe what is going on there. And you will come home thinking that anybody that calls it communist China doesn't understand China anymore. So anyway, What we have had in this country, and what we've had in Canada and Europe and Australia and other places around the world, is what I like to call the democratization of prosperity. Various economists at the University of Paris, at the University of North Carolina, at the University of California have basically shown that if you can increase the area that people can access, can reach, in say 30 minutes or 25 minutes in a particular period of time, you actually increase the economic growth of an urban area. But it's more than that, because it comes down to an issue of fairness and providing income to low-income people, to jobs to low-income people. Study at University of California says that if we could give every African-American household in the nation a car, we would cut the difference in the unemployment rate between whites and African-Americans by 50%. Another study basically says that and this by the Democratic Leadership Council said basically that the fastest road to employment is to give people cars. And I'm not suggesting we go out and give everybody a car, but the point is mobility makes all the difference in the world. Imagine being a poor person, being in a situation where you're on welfare and trying to get, for example, to downtown Vancouver, downtown Portland, Gresham, on transit to get to work, to look for jobs. No wonder we've got such unemployment. Now, what I want to talk now about, and you can see that little thing there, I'll describe it to you, is the sort of Portland planning philosophy, and it's what is behind much of what we're dealing with respect to the toll issue and light rail in Clark County. This is one of those marvelous neighborhoods in Portland where they've decided, where the planners have decided you can't live in big houses anymore. We just can't afford that for all sorts of reasons that, with all due respect, don't make sense at all. Now, down in the corner, you see something. This is from the famous Thomas Cole picture, a painting from the 30s or 40s. I think his series was called The Journey of Life. And this, in this particular painting, you have this, what I call an ivory tower, this beautiful sort of image in the painting that's not the main part of the painting. And so you're going to see that on a number of our slides, because one of the problems with this Portland planning philosophy, which I'm going to describe to you, is that it is ivory tower, and that it does not take into consideration economic reality, and in the long run is going to lead to a poorer society. The Portland planners, and by the way, they are the most famous, shall we say, smart growth planners in the world. And remember, calling something smart doesn't make it smart. It certainly isn't. But you see, they don't want that kind of living. Most all of Clark County is a kind of place where they do not approve of. They don't want people to have suburban houses. They'd be real happy if they didn't have cars. They'd be really happy if you're all on very small lots. What they want instead is high density. You can see that in the Pearl District, in the South Waterfront District, and all of that kind of thing. And they obviously favor the urban core. Don't think for a minute that Portland's interest in bringing light rail to Vancouver is not to strengthen downtown Portland. It has nothing to do with Vancouver. It has to do with strengthening downtown Portland and Multnomah County. They are anti-car. Our cars are our enemies. And indeed, there's no question we have problems of pollution, etc., with cars. But let me tell you, all of the evidence is indicating great technological advance at this point, which I will describe later. Our cars are becoming incredibly cleaner, and they have become incredibly cleaner through the years. Instead, they would like us to follow this European ideal. They would like us to believe that everybody is on transit in Europe. And of course, they aren't. And in fact, I'm sorry to say that I find a lot of urban planners don't realize they aren't, this being a picture from Milan. And then another issue, why do you think so many people have come from Oregon to shop in Washington? Well, for one thing, you have Walmart here. Walmart isn't legal. You can't build a Walmart supercenter in Portland. They would rather have their poor people pay higher prices than allow them to have the prices that Walmart charges. And that is a real problem. And so there are these popular transit claims, and you see my ivory tower again. This is from Perth, Australia. There is this view that transit reduces traffic congestion. It does not. There is this view that transit is a substitute for the automobile. Well, I challenge you, especially any of you who live in Portland, try living your life on transit for a week and see what happens. Find out how many hours you don't have and how many places you can't go. That's not to suggest transit does not have a very important role, but it is to suggest the Portland ideal that basically suggests that transit is the answer to everything is really far off from the truth.